Well, you need to ask the Commonwealth Government precisely what that number, but if it is 1,000, then it comes off the 3,000 to 4,000.
If rainfalls are above the baseline case or below it, does the additional water go to the irrigators or to the environment, or correspondingly if it falls short of the baseline?
Very good question. What the proposal is that's laid out in the guide, and clearly what we're going to consult on, is to set up a framework that in future, in terms of climate variability, so that the reductions will actually occur more equitably between both the environment and human uses. In the past, when reductions took place, invariably the party that suffered most between those two was the environment. So the intent is that the environment adjusts with a decline in water, but so does irrigation, but that it is in a proportional fashion.
The report seems to imply that the Commonwealth measures, buybacks and infrastructure measures that have already been promised will achieve only half of the about half of it. There might be a 1,000 to 2,000 gigalitre gap. Is that right?
I think that clearly, and let me make it clear, we're not making the judgment in terms of how much the Commonwealth Government has already done. And I was happy to respond to say, to the extent that that number of 1,000 is correct, that reduces the 3,000 to 4,000. To the extent that works and measures also reduce also contribute to works and measures that actually provide environmental water, that would also reduce the number. I think that's going to be an important point that is going to be discussed as part of this guide, particularly between Commonwealth and state governments as well as communities, and we really encourage it. We're looking forward to receiving advice to the extent that works and measures can reduce that 3,000 to 4,000 number.
So do you have a preference between infrastructure investment and buybacks?
No, I think we put it in a very simple way. It's going to need a comprehensive package of measures to, in fact, appropriately achieve the sorts of changes that are set out and required by the Parliament.
Can I just ask a question about farming? I realise it's a very complex report, but we only, we don't have 300 pages to write about it in our newspapers or television stations. Farmers are seeing this as, or irrigators, they have to give more back, or there's a bigger buyback for the benefit of the environment. They say that it's too much, it's going to cause thousands of job losses and people vacating the area. Do you see that as accurate? Do you see it as a legitimate concern?
We certainly do it. If I can just go back to the comments I made just a little.
And can we make the comments as simple as, because it is getting quite complex.
Okay, well, look, let me put this in very simple terms. That existing 3,000 to 4,000 gigalitres of water currently is going through irrigation systems that generate revenues, that provide employment through processing industries, through small businesses that support those processors and irrigators, and also that economic activity gives rise to the success of rural and regional communities. When one removes water that's used for economic value and is returning economic value, you get a consequence impact in terms of the irrigation communities, and we have been very much up front. The legislation does not address this issue, but we have drawn it out very strongly in the report because we think it's a critical issue that has to be addressed by governments and communities.
Can you provide an indicative benefit to South Australia from the increased flows and would change the water situation? But those irrigators are at the top end of the cuts. Are they then given some hope that the balance will be redressed, only to have that hope taken away?
I'm not quite. Look, let me just put it this way. I'm not quite sure of the question, so
what will be the improvement for South Australia? Because irrigators there have borne a lot already.
Oh, in South Australia, irrigators across the basin are actually going to, in fact, incur the source of the water where this is moved from human purposes back to environmental purposes. In particular in South Australia, which does see some very significant environmental gains in terms of the lower lakes and the Coorong and increased export of salt through the mouth of the Murray. But importantly, all irrigators operating off the Murray system in New South Wales, Victoria and South Australia will face equal reductions. So there is a significant impact in terms of irrigators in South Australia, irrigators in Victoria, and irrigators in New South Wales on the Murray River itself.
But the South Australians are at the higher end of those cuts, are they not?
No, they're not at the high end of the cuts. I can tell you that we have, in fact, as we've developed this, very much treated each of the valleys consistent with delivering water down through the mouth, and the bigger reductions would almost certainly take place in the rivers to the south, that's the Goulburn Broken system, and the Murrumbidgee system in terms of the overall lower basin.
From an environmental point of view, you picked a range and you're pushing, you're advocating for the bottom end of that range for 3,000 or 3,500. The report suggests that will still require trade-offs between the Coorong or sections of the Murray. Isn't that what this whole process was supposed to get past?
No, so let me just, when we bring out the final, the draft plan, which will also go through consultation, and the actual plan itself, will bring out a definitive number. What the authority has done in terms of bringing out this range of 3,000 to 4,000 is as follows. Our assessment, based on the data and information available to us, is that we will just meet the environmental requirements of the Act at 3,000 gigalitres per year. That can be still disputed, and that's why we've put all the data and the information and the analysis into the public arena. We know that the greater the volume of water, though, that is transferred to the environment, the greater a surety that you get for those environmental improvements. We've put in 3 different levels, 3,000, 3,500 and 4,000. We have not gone beyond 4,000, even though some of our data, which you'll see in the report, indicates that we could have gone to 7,000 gigalitres plus. The reason we drew the line at 4,000, while I've identified that social and economic impacts are going to be very significant already at the 3,000 level, we think that they are just beyond management 4,000 plus. So we've not chosen to go beyond that in the proposals we put forward. I might add we have not chosen any point in where we should come out in that range.
Can you give an indicative sense of what?
Actually, there was a new question over here, if I could.
Just your report saying 800 full-time job losses and about $1 billion in agricultural production. How are you proposing the government should compensate communities that are affected by that?
2 things. One, we've put in some analytical work, so let me make it clear. The data you just quoted is not data we're saying black and white is correct in any shape or form. And importantly, we think that the economy-wide studies that have been undertaken work well on a national basis and even work well on a basin-wide basis. But we do not think those economic models are satisfactory for dealing with what localised impacts are likely to be. And we would certainly be encouraging a lot more work to take place on that. It is our view that they are likely to be quite significantly higher than the sorts of numbers that come out of those general equilibrium models.
When you set the
let's finish the question then. The question was then, and what are we proposing? The Act does not give us the power to actually respond in that. The Act actually is very much focused on what the environmental issues are. We have gone out of our way to actually give very strong emphasis to this issue of social and economic impact, because we think it is a critical issue, and in addition to what is contained within the Act, in our view, that needs to be addressed very proactively in order to deal and to deliver a successful basin plan.
So how much higher than 800 jobs are we looking at?
I think we actually need to go, as a Murray-Darling Basin Authority, we're an environmentally based organisation. That's what we would be encouraging, is further analytical work to be undertaken. We've already put on the table a reasonable amount from our point of view, but there are more expert groups than us to make that assessment, but we would strongly encourage it.
Can you give me